Tim is one of the main guys in the club that's going forward on this. So, Tim.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Mr. Mayor and councillors. It's tremendous to be here. My background, by the way, I'm not an environmentalist. I'm a retired executive, used to from a large bank. I've been retired for about 4 years now. I'm not a long-term resident on Bowen Island. My wife and I have been here now for about 3 years, but I've learned a lot in that period of time. During the national park presentations, and I went to all of the presentations, there was one in particular talking about marine life. Fortunately, Andrew taped it, and I thought it would be a good idea to show that video just so we can really get an appreciation of the marine life around Bowen Island. And it is absolutely spectacular. And it's also, what I learned, very, very unique. It's not everywhere, and it's because of the geology of our fjord that we live in here in Howe Sound. We have some marine life that is very, very unique to here. It's worth protecting. And when I saw the video during the presentation, it dawned on me that regardless of how the vote turned out, it's something that I was really interested in. It piqued my interest. So I got involved last fall in finding out about the possibility of creating marine protected areas. I'll talk about that in a little while because we're not going down that path anymore. And doing other things, at which point I talked to Bill, and I've been a member of the Bowen Island Fish and Wildlife Club for about 2 years, so I'm a volunteer and a stream keeper. And I talked to Bill, and that's when we came to the conclusion that really we should combine it all because streams are connected to the oceans and so on. So I might cut this video off a little bit short because it's too long. It's about 9 minutes, and we don't want to, I just want you to see the points of those. So if we can see the video, that would be great.
Just to clarify, it was Chris Harvey Clark is the one who did the filming. Yeah, okay. So this is Chris Harvey Clark's footage.
There's a great deal of information available from the Vancouver Aquarium, UBC, Simon Fraser, many videos like this.
These are newly formed sponge reefs off Bowen.
They have these sponges, and they're huge, are here. They also have them off the shores of New Zealand, apparently. Not very many other places in the world have sponges like this. And again, it's because of our cold winter runoff and so on that comes off the mountains into the Howe Sound. I'll be talking about rockfish a little bit later, because that's where we're eventually going to go with the Fish and Wildlife Club.
It's going to help things along.
You identify the species as the...
You know, when Chris Harvey Clark was talking about it, he did a tremendous job at identifying all the species.
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't have that knowledge.
Wow. Every single bit of this footage is around our island.
Great to speed it up a little bit. Just teeming life down there, and I guess it shows that life is coming back to Howe Sound. That's the good news with the closing of the Britannia mine and cleaning up the pulp mill and so on. It's had quite a beneficial effect on Howe Sound.
Can you talk while it's running, Tim? I mean, because there's not much sound in it.
Yeah, you're right. Sure, I can talk. So what I'm going to, Howe Sound itself, what I've discovered is it's one of the most studied bodies of water, certainly on the West Coast, certainly in this part of the world. And it's because of the proximity of UBC, Simon Fraser, the Vancouver Aquarium, University of Victoria, and various other educational institutions that come here and study it and study it. So for many, many years, Howe Sound has been tracked. Howe Sound was, and I won't use the word lifeless, but during the Britannia mine days, marine life in Howe Sound was virtually wiped out. And it's because the products that they use in that type of mine are absolutely deadly for fish. It kills them instantly. Um, and when they closed the mine, there was some question about whether life was going to come back. It has. And as Bill mentioned with the herring, there's certain things we can do ourselves to make a huge impact. And so it's always really good to see individual action like they're doing with the Squamish streamkeepers, and the positive effect happening very quickly from that. One of the things now that we're concerned about is rockfish. And rockfish are live in one place. They don't leave like herring and salmon and then eventually come back and spawn. Some species of rockfish live to be over 100 years old, so they're quite unique in that sense. They don't even lay eggs and reproduce until they're 7 years old. They stay here, so it's an animal, a form of marine life that actually lives off our shores in certain locations. And if we can do certain things to protect rockfish, to keep them from being fished out, that would be a very, very positive thing to do, because once they're gone, they're gone. And it can take many, many years for them to come back, if ever. Now that it's not an eel. That's actually some kind of, when I did listen to the thing, it's some kind of snake type of animal. It's a fish, it's not a snake, but they're abundant off our shores. There's a clip a little bit later on from King Edward Bay, another one off the Mount Gardner docks, and they make a comment there. This is a huge octopus. So this is a Pacific giant octopus. And this one is just off Hut Island, and apparently there's a whole colony there. I'm not a diver, but there's been people who've been diving in Howe Sound for 30 or 40 years, and there's more video available than you can shake a stick at, which is wonderful.
No, we're going to do that now.
Okay, maybe what I'm going to do is just sit down so I can go through some of my notes and make sure that I cover all the points.
Bill, how do you know when the herring come back?
The herring live to about 15 years old, and they start spawning after 2 years. And it's February, March, April, and there's usually 2 spawns. Since 2004, the herring have, because of the successes in Squamish, they're starting to come south into, like, towards Bowen Island. And there is the herring, on the west coast of the island. They come up between like Paisley and Gambier and what have you when they head up. And the people on Bowen are starting to see the herring boils like they used to see back in the 50s. And they have been in the cove, but they've just come in and gone. So they're starting to come down south.
And that's the reason the porpoise are coming back and the whales are coming back and so on. It's fantastic. Now, I want to talk about this shellfish poaching situation. It's very timely. We couldn't have planned it better than having those poachers caught last week. I'll tell you, that's absolutely fantastic. So what's been happening? On April 15th, there was a posting on the forum, and basically the posting went like this, and it was posted the day after an event took place. Yesterday on Sandy Beach, I saw 6 people jump out of a van and fill up over a period of time 8 garbage bags of oysters and clams and drive away with it. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know who to call. Does anybody know what we should be doing when we see such a thing? So I read that and called Bill, and I went, we've got to be doing something. What is the situation with oysters and clams? And Bill and I sort of admitted to each other that, even we don't really know that well what the situation is. But there are things that we can be doing. What we found out is this poaching has been going on for many, many years. This isn't an isolated event. It happens a lot, as we saw last week with in a very short period of time, another man showed up. And what happens is they will strip a beach of oysters and clams, and it can take over 10 years for them to come back. So it's not something that, what's wrong with taking oysters? It is a situation where they can devastate our beaches in a very short period of time. So what we've learned is that Howe Sound, all of Howe Sound, including around Bowen Island, has been closed to shellfish, all shellfish for years. fishing, and it's for health reasons. It's because they're contaminated. They shouldn't be taking them. What the poachers seem to be doing in many cases, and these are very organized groups, is they take the clams and oysters and they take them into town, they sell them to restaurants, organizations that will distribute them to restaurants. So some of them are making a buck at it. Other ones, I suppose, are coming over and just getting the clams and the oysters and eating them themselves. But most of them, they're actually selling it to restaurants. That made me wonder if I should be eating oysters and clams from certain restaurants. I asked them, I actually do. I said, where did you get your oysters and clams? And I make sure they tell me something. I don't know if it's true or not, but tell me where they're getting them before we do it. The other thing we learned is that DFO, for all their good intentions, and really it's up to them to enforce it. There's one DFO enforcement officer. He's located, his name is David Loop. He's located in Squamish, not on Bowen. And realistically, they can't enforce all the regulations that they have. They just can't. And they certainly can't afford to have an enforcement officer on every beach. It's just not going to happen. So it's very important that we do something ourselves. When we talked to, and Bill actually got together with DFO, the RCMP, and Corporal Nancy Joyce here was wonderful. She said that she would certainly be prepared to get involved. Phone the local RCMP here. They'll go down to the beach as they did last week. They'll confiscate the goods. They'll detain the people. And if need be, they will fine them because they have the DFO fine book, it's called. And they will enforce the DFO regulations themselves, which is, we didn't know that. And that's an absolutely fantastic thing to know. So what we're doing is we're having signs produced that are actually going to be available this week. And we're paying, the Fish and Wildlife Club is paying for the signs. And the municipality has graciously said they'll install the signs on the beaches. They'll look something like this. And basically they're the circle with the line through it. There's two different sets of signs. Some of them go on, the first set you'll look at is a prohibition of crabs, shrimp, and shellfish. That will go on certain beaches in Deep Bay and Grafton Bay. The other ones are just for oysters and clams, and those ones will go on other beaches. So we'll determine exactly what beaches they'll be put up on. Our vision, and I'll try to clip along a bit here. If we look at a vision of where we want this to go, ideally everybody on Bowen Island, all of us, all 4,000 or 4,500, or many of us there are, would start to take a special pride in looking after our beaches and the marine life offshore, and also our streams. And we're all environmentally conscious. I don't think any of us would live here if we weren't. So on that side, get everybody really behind this. And the other side is we want poachers, regardless of where they're located, to say, don't go to Bowen Island. They're awful over there. They take our pictures, they phone the RCMP. I had the RCMP down at the beach. We can't get anything off the island because they confiscate it before we can get back. Don't go to Bowen Island, go somewhere else. And eventually maybe that would go to other areas of Howe Sound. So that's the situation with poaching, and it's a really good news story, and I think it's going to get better. We've got this story in the undercurrent. My next step is to go and get stories in the papers in Vancouver and Richmond and other locations, and also maybe Black Press has agreed that in other locations in their regional areas they'll run with a story, and so, but they want a video first, so there's some things we have to do to make that happen. Now, the other thing about protecting marine life, and that's a fascinating situation, and long term, there's many organizations working toward creating marine protected areas and rockfish conservation areas, most of them with limited success. Our government regulations are not good for creating them. There's many different groups that get involved. There's a lot of different interests. So the Marine Life Sanctuary Society, which is the organization that we've decided to link up, and they're sort of working all toward Howe Sound. We're going to bring a special Bowen flavor to anything they do and work together with them. Their attitude is very simple. Roy Mulder is the president. Chris Harvey Clark, who did the video, is also one of their directors. Adam Taylor is a very, very important member of this organization. Roy Mulder puts it really simple. If we wait for government to protect our marine environment, we'll be long dead and in our graves before anything is done, because it's so difficult to create. actual protected areas. That's not to say we can't do certain things ourselves. They have produced some rockfish conservation areas off the Paisleys, around Gambier, one over in Portal Cove. There's none around Bowen Island yet. And here's the perverse part of this whole situation and why we have to do something to get everybody involved in it. They've created rockfish protected areas around the Paisleys. They haven't around Bowen. What happens is, when they establish a rockfish conservation area, it becomes a target. So when they did this about 10 years ago, the Paisleys have slowly been fished out. And around Bowen Island, rockfish are doing fine. They're coming back. So we have to be really careful to say that what we're doing is all around Bowen Island. We cannot identify where the particular rockfish pools are. It's a sad thing to say, but that's just reality, or they could be fished out. Again, we can't depend solely on government. If we do that, you know, we've got a long rate. What the Marine Life Sanctuary Society, and we're going to help them do this, is to create voluntary rockfish protected areas. Yes, John?
Just, I'm looking at the time.
Okay, here we go. I'll go real fast. So voluntary rockfish conservation areas are the answer to that we're working toward. We'll get all groups involved in it. Education is also one. I guess our efforts have to be ongoing and long-term. I guess what message would we like to leave with you? We would appreciate your advice moving forward when we start to develop more specific strategies. From time to time, we may ask to come and talk to you again, just to update you. And this is a very important initiative, and we appreciate your support. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, Councilor Morris?
I'm curious as to why I got two questions and a comment. Why the ban for the shrimp and the crab, because I thought reading the DFO website that areas 28 and 29, it was just bivalve.
Apparently in Deep Bay, and that's a great question because that's what we thought, but we found out that in Deep Bay and Grafton Bay, and it was actually Will Hilston who found this out for us, and DFO confirmed it, that's shrimp and crab as well. And I don't know if it's more contaminated or
So
why
their
it is.
website, and I had this big discussion with the fisheries officer last summer, is totally unclear because the heading of the section talks about shellfish and then it goes on to say bivalve. So that's my first point. My second point is I understood from talking to the conservation officer last summer, that's a long story, it's how I got talking to him, which I won't relate. He told me that there was a rockfish conservation area for all of Howe Sound, and the only legal place you could catch cod of any kind was over by Thrasher Rock. So, and the other issue, yeah. So anyhow, I'll go home and find his name and phone number because it isn't the guy in Squamish, she's in downtown Vancouver. And the other thing is, in having the discussion with him, I sort of said to him, well, there's two boats we see out front all the time. So if anybody sees a houseboat called Ling Ling and a smaller boat called Aces High, you are to call the enforcement line. They have enforced those guys already. They're on their radar, and they want to know when they're out and around here. And it's interesting, as soon as you go out with the camera, the binoculars, they see you and they take off.
Yeah.
So that's just, so if you see Aces High.
Allison, there's quite a bit of confusion there. We thought there was a rockfish ban as well.
Well,
Then we found out there wasn't. And so we'll get more clarification on that. But our latest understanding is around Bowen, there isn't. So.
They find it.
The poachers know exactly.
Thanks.
The poachers know and don't go anywhere anyway.
Quick.
Tim, thank you very much for doing this. The first step in educating the public on what's going on off our shores. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah.